All right. Welcome to the fire weather briefing for July 7th, 2025. You have myself, Miranda, in Spokane and Jake in Seattle. And we'll be going over some active weather for some of the area this week. Currently, satellite just showing pretty clear skies on the east side, a little bit more on the west side. If Jake wants to say something about that.
Yeah, thanks, Miranda. Yeah, so as you can see, we had stratus move inland overnight towards the southwest interior, up making to about Shelton and then to about Port Angeles in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Also on a highlight, we had a new wildfire develop later yesterday around Lake Cushman. You can see some of that smoke around Mason County as well. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you. Just a quick look at the 24-hour precipitation. Not much to speak of. A little bit of stuff near the Canadian border and around the lower portions of Shoshone County, but not wetting rains at all, except for maybe up north of the Canadian border. That doesn't help us. Heading to the fire weather summary, we'll go to the west side first.
Yeah, so we'll be maintaining those warm and dry conditions today through tomorrow with kind of a ridge of high pressure really in place over western Washington and much of the Pacific Northwest. That will maintain lower RHs during the afternoon, although we will have onshore flow during the overnight period. So we'll see some rebounding the RHs during the overnight hours. We'll be looking at as a weak frontal system moving in Wednesday, which will bring cooler temperatures, increasing cloud stratus, as well as rain chances. We're also potential for a chance of wetting rain, mainly for the North Cascades during that time period. Still some uncertainty in the precipitation amounts, but that'll be the next time period we're looking at for any sort of precipitation across western Washington. And then we start to drought again on Thursday, and then another ridge kind of builds in Friday. So another return for dry conditions, lowering RHs, and warm conditions heading into next weekend. That's what I have.
Perfect. East side got a little bit more heat coming in through the first part of this week ahead of the cold front. Today's will be warm. Then as we head into Tuesday, it'll be much milder. It'll be the hottest day of the week. And then we have a system pushing in around Wednesday, Thursday to bring relatively cooler temperatures. I say relatively, emphasizing relatively. And then that'll come with some increased winds, maybe some dry thunderstorms, and we warm up again a little bit towards the end of the week. But our focus days are Tuesday and Wednesday, when we have the hottest conditions and some increasing winds with some low RHs, and then some spotty, isolated, dry thunderstorm potential. So Tuesday, Wednesday will be our days of concern on the east side. With that said, here are weather concerns for Tuesday. The wind RHs, the areas near the lee of the Cascades have the most critical potential for those wind RH combos. A little bit less, a little bit further south, but still an elevated concern for some pretty dry RHs, with those winds starting to increase with that front approaching the area. And as we head into Wednesday, we have a broader area of elevated concerns, much stronger winds in the area, much more definitive signal with that front coming in. RHs start to come up a bit, so it's not as much of a concern RH-wise, but it's still elevated to critical potential that day. So let's see, moving on to the current hazards. So on the east side, we have fire weather watches for Tuesday afternoon from 1 p.m. through Wednesday at 8 p.m. for those wind RHs. And then we also have a fire weather watch out for the deeper Columbia Basin into the Spokane area, Palouse down near Stoughton County, for hot, dry, windy conditions still. There's also the heat advisories in place across much of eastern Washington into the deeper basin for temperatures in the upper 90s to low 100s. So heading into the weather, we'll look at today's maximum temperature. On the east side, we have a lot of 80s and a significant amount of 90s to near 100 in some spots. Anything you want to say about the temperatures?
No, just another warm day across Western Washington with temperatures generally ranging in the 80s for much of the interior, with cooler temperatures where that stratus is along the coast.
Okay. And here are the minimum RHs for today. A lot of teens to low 20s across the east side and on the west side.
Yeah, our minimum RHs will drop this afternoon, generally into the low 30% range, towards places from Seattle southwards down towards Chehalis, in the interior areas. They'll remain relatively higher along the coast, and then they'll also bottom out, mainly on the Cascade Crest and the Cascade Valleys. You see Packwood there around 22%. So definitely a dry day across Western Washington for those elevated fire weather conditions.
Okay, and moving to day 2 into Tuesday, we see even hotter temperatures across the eastern part of Washington, near 100s to low 100s. So another really hot day, keeping, it's been almost 2 months since some of those areas in the basin have seen any wetting rain, so that's significant. Starts to cool down on the west side.
Yeah, so we start to cool down a bit, at least for the coastal areas, as we get on to tomorrow on Tuesday, but we'll maintain warm conditions across much of the interior with highs generally in the low to mid 80s and maybe some upper 80s in spots in the Cascade Valleys tomorrow afternoon.
Okay. And min RHs on Tuesday, generally from about 10 to 20% on the east side, which is not good. And with that, we have those increasing winds around 10 to 20 miles per hour, strongest kind of near the Waterville Plateau, the Cascades, into the upper Columbia Basin, and even stronger gusts, 20 to 30 or so. And looking at the chance of wetting rains on the west side.
Yeah, so we start to see the frontal system move into the area Tuesday night and really drop southwards on Wednesday. So Wednesday is likely the peak time for any precipitation chances across a good portion of Western Washington. Again, chance of wetting rain is limited in probability, particularly focused on the North Cascades on Wednesday. Elsewhere, we'll see some light precipitation around, especially in the mountains and on the western slopes of the Olympic Peninsula. So it's a fairly quick moving system and will be out of the area by Thursday morning, but we are going to at least have some light rain during that time period midweek, but chance of wetting rain mainly limited to the North Cascades with this frontal system.
Okay, and heading into Wednesday, we see temperatures cooling down, relatively speaking, about 10 degrees cooler than Tuesday, but still pretty hot, I would say. The min RHs are much better on the west side. They start to come up on the east side, but still relatively low in the upper teens to near 30, and then a little bit higher near the Cascade Crest. But the most notable difference will be the winds. They'll be much higher on Wednesday with that system pushing in and that cooler air. Relatively speaking, coming in, winds in the 15 to 25, 30 mile per hour range, and higher gusts around 35 to 45. So even though the RHs are coming up, it's still been pretty dry, still pretty hot, and still leading to that potential for some critical fire weather conditions. And we've had a lot of starts around the area over the past several days. And if there's all that wind, it might be hard for any starts to really get, initial attack might be a little trickier if it's this windy. And here's that chance of wetting rain for Wednesday. You can talk on the west side about that.
Yeah, those probabilities again peak generally in the North Cascades. You see anywhere from about 40-50% across portions of Skagit and Whatcom County. Lower as you get farther south in the Cascades, and similar story for the Olympic Peninsula. So this would be the peak time period for any precipitation. Again, that pretty much would be beginning late Tuesday night through the day on Wednesday with this frontal system.
And I'll show the prob lightning. There's some isolated thunderstorm potential around the North Cascades, northeast Washington to North Idaho. Any of that stuff would more likely be dry, but again, the potential is pretty low, around 10 to 15% or so. But it's a risk, and any lightning this time of year is not really all that favorable. So I'll head on to the QPF just to show where that is. So as we go into Tuesday, start to see some precipitation coming towards into British Columbia, just clipping northwest coast. And then as we head into day 3, we have that better potential of rain coming up to the Cascade crest and on the west side and kind of near the Canadian border a little bit. And day 4 to 5, just some chances expanding maybe to the Idaho Panhandle, but nothing too significant with that. And we'll head to the trends, and we'll go to Seattle first.
Yes. Thanks, Miranda. And this shows the
You're
trends fairly well for much of Western Washington. You see those warm days, particularly being today into tomorrow, with highs in the 80s for the Seattle area. Getting warmer as you get into the Cascade foothills and valleys. Those RHs bottom out generally today and tomorrow as well during the afternoon periods. Towards 30% for much of kind of the Seattle southwards, as well as into the Cascade valleys and foothills, potentially even lower in those areas into the 20% range. And then we see a bump up in RHs as well as a cool down in temperatures with that frontal system Wednesday into Thursday. We then are looking for a ridge to rebound again pretty quickly as we get into Friday and the next weekend. So we might start seeing those RHs drop again pretty quickly. Friday afternoon is another period we'll have to keep an eye on for elevated fire weather conditions, depending on how much QPF we get during the Wednesday-Thursday system. But overall, QPF looks pretty light, so there's concern for another round of elevated fire weather conditions as we get into Friday due to the rebounding high pressure and drier conditions across much of Western Washington. And then pretty much a relatively dry, warm pattern continues into next weekend. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you. And on the east side, I'll look at Douglas Ross, showing our warm up as we go into the next couple days, peaking out on that Tuesday time frame and then dipping down. Then we have that next warm up towards the latter part of the week, comparable to today, Monday. And our RHs are bottoming out early in the week. Some better RHs as we go into the middle part of the week, and then we start to bottom out again a little bit as we go towards the latter part of the week. So similar elevated concerns, especially early this week, and then again, something to keep an eye out as we go into the latter part of the week. Those winds being pretty strong as we go into Wednesday, and still pretty breezy through Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we get another uptick a little bit towards the latter part of this week into next weekend. And looking a little further east, looking at the Spokane area, not too much different than further west, just less in the way of winds, except for on Wednesday. So that'll be the critical day that we'll be really keeping an eye out for. And that relative cool down before we start to bump back up again, and minimal precipitation chances in there. And the 8 to 14 day forecast is just showing slightly better than odds of an above normal temperatures and slightly above normal precipitation potential over the northern side of Washington. But this time of the year, any precipitation is seems to be above normal. So take that for what that is. Anything left to add on the west side?
Nope. Great job. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you. And that will do it for this briefing today. And